Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4. We will be reading from chapter 22. Prithu meets the four Kumaras. Mukam Karoti Vachalam, Pangum Lagate Girim. Yatkratamam Vande, Shri Gurum Dinatayanam, Parvananda Madhavam, Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram, Hari Om Tat Sat. The four Kumara sages appear at Prithu's sacrificial arena. Verses 1 and 2. A great effulgence descended from the sky, illuminating the sacrificial arena. Prithu and his citizens peered up, shielding their eyes. The brilliance gradually materialized into the forms of four young naked boys holding water pots. Many citizens gasped, "How have these children traveled through the skies?" The Brahmins explained, "They are the four Kumars, masters of the mystic powers, shining like four suns." The boys slowly descended to earth. Verses 3 to 5. King Prithu came down from his throne to receive them. A large ornate seat covered with a silk cushion was quickly brought. Prithu garlanded the brothers and then led them to the seat. When the boys were comfortably settled, Prithu prostrated himself before them, bathed their feet and reverentially worshipped them according to Vedic injunctions. He then took the water that had washed their feet and sprinkled it over his head. So that is the etiquette. That after doing the washing or bathing the feet of exalted people, you take that water and sprinkle it over your head. The citizens marveled at his humility. What a perfect example how to receive saintly persons. Verse 6. Prithu stood with folded palms before the boys. How wonderful that these ancient sages, older even than Lord Shiva, had graced his sacrifice. Royal servants stood on either side, fanning them with pure white chamar whisks. The Kumars appeared like fires blazing on an altar. Verses 7 to 9. Prithu said, "My dear great sages, you are auspiciousness personified. You are rarely seen even by mystic yogis. What kind of piety must I have performed that you have appeared before me?" By pleasing Brahmins and Vaishnavas, one can achieve whatever he desires in this life. And the next, no matter how difficult. One also achieves the favor of Vishnu and Shiva, who always accompany such devotees. Although you travel throughout the universe, people cannot see you, just as they cannot see the supersoul in the heart, who is unseen even by Brahma or Shiva. So we should stop worrying when we read this, that even Lord Shiva or Brahma, they cannot see the supersoul in the heart. So what we can do is we can just purify ourselves, purify our hearts, so that we can one day start worshipping the supersoul, the localized form of the Lord residing within each of us. Verses 10 to 11. Prithu turned to the citizens, "Please hear my words. A man who lacks wealth is not respected in materialistic society. In spiritual circles, a man too attached to family life is similarly not respected. However, no matter who you are, just by graciously receiving such exalted guests in your home, you become glorious. A poor man can offer visiting saints a glass of water or simple straw mat to sit on, or at least kind words of greeting. By so doing, even the lion than a tree filled with the venomous serpents, if saintly people are not respectfully welcomed there." Verses 12 and 13, Prithu turned back to the four boys, sages who sat peacefully, their hands resting on their crossed legs. O best of the Brahmins, you are welcome. You have observed celibacy throughout your lives, and although you appear as small children, you have achieved liberation. On the other hand, due to our past deeds, persons like us are attached to sense gratification and are thus trapped in this dangerous material existence. How can we achieve good fortune? The four boy sages looked at each other with a smile, and one said, O king, normally when guests arrive, the host inquires after their welfare, yet you ask us about your own. Verses 14 to 16, Dear sirs, replied Prithu, there is no need to inquire after your fortune, because you are absorbed in spiritual bliss and are unaffected by the illusion of happiness and distress. Certainly saints like you are well-wishers for everyone burning in material existence. The Lord, anxious to deliver the conditioned souls, traverses the globe for their benefit in the form of self-realized souls like you. Therefore, I ask you how we can achieve salvation. Verse 17, the boy saints glanced at one another, communicating telepathically. The king has spoken well. Yes, his words are deep with meaning, appropriate and very precise, most poetic also. Verses 18 to 20, Sanat Kumar said, My dear king, although you know the answer to your own questions, you ask for the benefit of others. Such behavior is typical of a saintly devotee. When devotees gather together and speak about Krishna, everyone benefits, even those who simply hear the discussions, what to speak of the participants. My dear king, you have already attained life's highest benefit, unwavering attachment to glorifying Krishna. This is rarely achieved, and it cleanses all material desire from the heart. Verses 21 to 22, Prithu bowed his head as Sanat went on. In answer to your question, it is concluded in scripture that the highest good for human society is detachment from the false identification with matter and firm attachment to the transcendental Supreme Person. To achieve this, you must take shelter of a pure devotee of Krishna, exclusively attached to satisfying the Lord. Serve such a devotee by hearing from him the Lord's glories and clear your doubts and confusions by submissive inquiry. You must then glorify Krishna by repeating the instructions you hear and by chanting the Lord's holy names. By such pious acts, you will increase your attachment for Krishna. Verse 23, you must also avoid associating with people interested only in sense gratification and making money. You should even shun those who associate with such persons. Eventually, you must come to the point of disgust with sense enjoyment and be unable to live for a moment without relishing Krishna's glories. Prithu said, O holy ones, how can someone progress to this stage? Verse 24, Sanat said, to increase attachment for Krishna, one must practice non-violence. By acting as a kind friend to all living beings, he should approach a self-realized spiritual master, hear about Krishna from him, always meditate on his teachings, observe the regulative principles he prescribes, and not criticize others who follow a different religious path. A devotee should also live simply and learn to tolerate the unavoidable miseries of material existence. So, such great instructions. And this one, the last one, which is just said, which is being told by Sanat Kumar, that a devotee should also live simply and learn to tolerate the unavoidable miseries of material existence. Prithu looked out at the assembly. The Brahmins and his ministers were obviously paying close attention and seemed to comprehend the sage's words. However, many among the merchants and working classes looked dismayed. He realized that they felt inadequate to apply these instructions. Turning to the Kumaras, he said, if one is incapable of following these teachings, what should he do? Verses 25 to 26, the four boy saints conferred. Then Sanat Kumar said, my dear king, the key practice is to constantly hear about and discuss the Lord's transcendental qualities and pastimes. Such talks are pleasing to all devotees regardless of their level. The more devotees hear about Krishna, the more they become detached from the material world and attached to the Lord. When, as a result of hearing about and discussing the spiritual master's teachings, attachment for Krishna awakens, one is liberated. How exactly does this happen? Asked the king. Sanat replied, the two virtues of spiritual knowledge and attachment to Krishna act like a blazing fire which burns up the five material illusions, binding the soul, namely ignorance, material attachment, hatred, bodily identification, and fear of death. What happens then? Verse 27, Sanat said, when one is liberated from these material coverings, he no longer acts for his personal sense gratification. At that time, he only serves Krishna, freed of material desires. He never laments or hankers for anything. The experience is like waking from a dream. One sees his true identity as a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna, and he no longer has any sense of personal interest separate from Krishna's. In other words, everything he does with his body, mind and speech are one with Krishna's desire. How can we tell if someone is truly on the liberated platform? Asked Prithu. Verse 28, Sanat said, when one exists for sense gratification, he identifies with the body and creates innumerable desires. But when he is liberated, he is no longer interested in anything except satisfying Krishna. Prithu said, are there any other symptoms? Verse 29, Sanat smiled. Due to material designations, we make distinctions between souls according to their bodies, just as one sees an object differently when it is reflected in water, in oil, or in mirror. So we make distinctions between souls when they inhabit the bodies of men, animals, or gods. However, when we regain our pure spiritual consciousness, we see Krishna everywhere in everyone. Prithu's brow furrowed slightly. Do you mean we are all Krishna? Sanat said, there is only one Krishna, there is only Krishna, everything is him. However, he appears as Swamsha and Vibhinamsha, expansion. Swamsha means his personal forms like Vishnu, Varaha, Kurma and Rama. Vibhinamsha means his separate expansions, the living entities. Prithu said, so a conditioned soul will distinguish between different bodies and designations, but the liberated soul will see only Krishna's Vibhinamsha, expansions, and not the outward covering. Sanat nodded. Exactly. How have we become so forgetful of the true self? Asked Prithu. Verses 30 to 32, Sanat said, constant thought of sense gratification disturbs the mind, obscuring one's original consciousness, which eventually becomes almost lost. It is like the reeds on the bank of a lake sucking up its water. In other words, by deviating from our spiritual activities to pursue sense gratification, we forget our real identities as Krishna's parts and parcels. Then all our activities are based on a false sense of self. The wise call this losing one's soul. That is why there is no greater harm to one's self-interest than choosing to pursue sense gratification over self-realization. So I think we will give a reading rest here and we'll continue from here onwards in next session, because this chapter is still has still got some pages to go through. So thank you for joining. Wish you all a very blissful remainder of the day. Hare Tat Sat, Hare Krishna.